But the East India Company had agreed to sponsor all of it. They knew the fortunes to be made if the embassy went well. Even back then, in the 18th century, many in England saw China as the most extensive market in the world. It only had to open, or be opened, for business. To impress the emperor with British science and manufacturing, Macartney had brought a fortune in gifts. Cathcart's embassy had carried gifts, but Macartney's embassy overflowed with offerings, more than 6 times as valuable as Cathcart's cargo. When they reached China, the Macartney embassy got special permission to land close to Peking on account of their gifts being so delicate. 90 wagons, 40 barrows, 200 horses, and 3,000 workers were used to carry all of the various objects into the capital city of the Chinese Empire. There were telescopes and barometers, clocks and hot air balloons, swords and pistols, textiles and stationery. The largest and most elaborate present for the emperor was a planetarium, built in Germany but embellished in England, which cost more than £1,200, more than 1 crore rupees in today's terms. This elaborate glass-encased machine contained a celestial globe that purported to show the Milky Way, as well as separate mechanisms for the orbits of Earth, Jupiter, and Saturn. It had 3 clocks that displayed various scriptural schedules that proudly proclaimed the end of time and the world was coming in 1836. One notable item that Macartney didn't take was an example of the recently invented steam engine, because he felt it wouldn't be worth the trouble. A strange decision when he was packing such a complicated oddity as this planetarium. But the Chinese ruler, the Qianlong Emperor, was not impressed. When the British walked through his palace, they found it full of clocks, machines, and other automata that the Chinese court had accumulated through the years, mostly from other European nations. The British were hoping to dazzle the Chinese with their engineering and technology, but the Chinese were far from dazzled. The emperor did indeed have a fascination for clockwork automata, but it was a fascination that had been regularly indulged. And from there, things got worse. As Macartney was led to the emperor, court etiquette was explained to him, but as orders were translated, confusion broke out. Words were slung back and forth. The exchange grew heated. Macartney was to prostrate himself, with his forehead touching the floor as was traditional when meeting the emperor. But the gentleman refused. As far as he was concerned, he did not kowtow to his own king. How could he do so for a foreign emperor? Historians aren't sure how the impasse of etiquette was finally negotiated. Chinese sources tend to say he eventually kowtowed, while British sources tend to deny it. What we do know is that in the end, the Qianlong Emperor refused all of the requests made. The embassy was a complete failure. The emperor was emphatic that China had no need for British goods. Within a few months, Macartney was forced to get back on his ship and sail sadly back to England. This was a disaster for Britain. They needed this trade deal more than the casual reader might imagine. The country was heading towards an economic flashpoint, what we refer to now as a balance of payments crisis, where imports were so much higher than exports that the country was literally running out of physical money to pay for their purchases. At the center of this economic tornado was the humble, calming cup of tea. For most of history, the Chinese mainland monopolized the cultivation of Camellia sinensis, more commonly known as tea. In most languages, the word for tea either starts with a t sound or a ch sound, as in chai, depending on whether it first arrived there by land or sea, that is, from the western or eastern part of China, respectively.